Hi there. This is a quick follow-up video to a much longer one I made about Empire of Ash, the upcoming Doom of Valyria prequel TV series to Game of Thrones. Specifically, the hour-long faction profile I made on the group known as the Freeholders. And a topic I started discussing in that was how to translate freeholders into non-English languages, because it turns out it doesn't translate directly into a lot of them like Italian. So people pointed this out, and I mentioned it in the main video, and we got a pretty good discussion going about it in the comments section for the main one. And I put in some placeholder guesswork translations, which were terrible in the main one, and people pointed out to me how, no, this would be a better translation than the one you cobbled together. So that was a lot of fun, and it felt like we made some good progress on it. So this is an update for the bad translations I made in the first one. But I want to split it off into its own video to draw attention to it and to keep this good discussion going. Now, I'm not going to repeat the whole first video. You should go back and watch that one. That, as I said, the Freeholders are, of the three factions, they're not Dragon Lords. The other two are Dragon Lords. They're not. They're the rich merchant princes, bankers, and magisters, this rising merchant class within the Valyrian freehold. So they're the local elites below the Dragon Lords themselves. And their strategy is money as power, and there are many diverse subgroups because they're from all over Essos and beyond. They're from Pentos to Marine and Sothorios. So people pointed out this doesn't translate well, and I'm just going to quickly run through some slides from the first video. It's short for free landholders. Free land owners is literally what it means. Because they're from the freehold of Valyria, Valyrian freehold. That's their term for republic. That it's like the Roman Republic, and the idea was all freeborn landowners can vote, at least in theory. And in practice, it's become dominated by aristocratic dragon lords over the centuries. And I also gave this quote from the novels in the main video, that from A Dance with Dragons, the chapter The Merchant's Man, Volantis is a freehold, like Valyria of old. All freeborn landholders share the rule. Even women are allowed to vote. So I pointed this out in the main one, and people in the comments discussion have been checking in their French version or Polish version of the novels, well, how did our translator give this line, freeborn landholders? Check that in your version, it's like one of the more obscure versions, but even that maybe your translator got it wrong, as it was just one line in a main novel, not even directly referring to this specific faction. So we might need to refine the translation anyway, but just check if you can. Because another problem is even major translations like German or Portuguese don't use literal translations and lose some of the intended meaning. Like their translation of Valyrian freehold, like the free land holdings of Valyria, the German version just uses Freistaat, literally Free State of Valyria, and Portuguese uses Dominio, which is just Domain of Valyria. So you might have to work out another one. So who are these people? Like I said, they're basically magisters, like Illyrio Mopatis of Pentos from A Song of Ice and Fire. So if all else fails, maybe just call them the magisters, like what your version calls Illyrio. Check what they call him. I'm not sure. And as I said, unfortunately, translations will probably lose some of the original meaning no matter what they do. It might be impossible to get the literal meaning across in your language, and I hope that in some cases we found, well, there's something equivalent to that in another language of the rich merchant class, that you could, oh, that kind of fits well for what they are, something analogous to this. Because the points you're trying to get across are that even in English, if you don't speak English as a primary language, the name itself is supposed to be outdated, archaic, and inaccurate. That it's a plot point. It reflects how the ancient Valyrian dragon lord aristocracy, who invented these social categories, only thought of making money from owning land, not from commerce or lending money at interest. So many of the free landholders in this story are actually rich bankers or merchant guilds and trade cartels. I mean, I think they nominally own some land, like the house, the warehouse, or dock where they keep their stuff, but their wealth isn't from landowning. And these are new slides now. Think about it. The Dutch East India Company was a trade cartel of merchants, a megacorporation. The name free landholders in Valyria is sort of like calling the Dutch East India Company the Landowners League. That this is inaccurate. But you see the plot point here. It's to reflect that they were named by an old aristocracy that doesn't understand commerce and banking. To reflect how the old aristocracy really can't grasp that you can get wealth not from land but from commerce. So you just think of someone in a story calling the Dutch East India Company the Landholders League. And it's the subtlety that these clashing unlike mentalities, that the aristocracy didn't catch up to that. For that matter, even the full term free-born landholder is outdated, given that several of them are ex-slaves, such as their POV character is an ex-slave originally from Yiti. So it didn't originally include freedmen thousands of years ago when the category was invented, apparently. And now it just refers to free in general, currently not a slave. I don't think they'd ever even bring that up, just call it free landholder and leave the born part out. I'm not sure when or if they'd address that, but we're trying to get a basic idea across of free landholder. If you're trying to translate this into something more obscure like Polish, Hungarian, some really not related to English language, don't worry about the freeborn part. I don't think they would either, unless we see something. But I'm just pointing that out, that the name is very inaccurate, and it's supposed to be inaccurate, but we'll check that out later. The points are, freeholders is short for a longer term. Free landholders, free landowners. So when you're trying to think up a translation, realize that the name you pick has to have a longer version that they don't use very often. That it's a clipped form of something longer. Next, it is intentionally archaic and outdated. Literally about land ownership, even though most are wealthy merchants and bankers. And lastly, and this is a big point, they are not hereditary nobility. Do not use a term for, like, gentry for minor nobility. They're not nobles. Don't use something that implies hereditary succession. So this is the list of names I suggested in the first video. These are not very good, and people suggested me in the comments better translations than this. Now the first two, I'm very confident this was great work, guys, the German and French versions. German, the translation that was suggested is Friborger, short for Free Provinzbürger. I speak French and Latin, so I don't pronounce German well, but that they worked in that, it's short for something longer. Not, this is a mistake I made in the spelling of the first one, it's not Burgherr, that's a homonym. Literally, that word is Burg, castle, heir, lord. That's a castle lord, minor nobility. That was a huge mistake on my part. They're not hereditary nobles. It's not Burgherr, it's Bürger. Also spelled Bürger without the umlaut. So that worked out pretty well with the German version. Well, Bürgers are urban merchants in the old German Empire, Holy Roman Empire, medieval times. So freeborn landholder, literally translated, wouldn't make that much sense in German. But when you go, they're like the burghers. Oh, you mean that we have a term for that, urban merchants in the medieval towns. So that pretty much works with that Friborger. Though I regret it doesn't convey the inaccuracy of it. That it's based on a landholding. The name implies landholding, even though they're really merchants. Kind of gets lost in translation, though I still feel this is the best we could probably come up with. But discuss this amongst yourselves, of course. En français, ils sont Franc-tenants, comme Franc-tenants de titre. abbreviating freeholder of ownership title. That's a little clunky, but it's supposed to, that they worked that in, that people suggested this to me, that it sounds archaic, but it should. It conveys that the name is outdated. And that is a real word that they looked up, that it's from Norman, it was used in Quebec and New France, that Franc-tenants works better than what I was using. And other languages may want to use that translation idea, this great example, that don't just go land owner, maybe go contract holder or title holder, because they own land contracts, they own title deeds to lands. Might be another way to play around with the translation. So Franc-tenant works pretty well. So we have two pretty good ones here for German Friborger and French Franc-tenant. I'm not so sure about other Romance languages that I don't speak, and I'm hoping that there are similar turns of phrase to what we did with French in the other Romance languages like Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian, that when you just plug this into Google Translate, free landowner for French resulted in propriétaire foncier libre. And you can see how Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, they're all cognates at proprietario di la terra libera or terra libera, or Italian proprietario del terreno gratuito. That's probably too literal. It's not what really works for French. We're propriétaire foncier libre. We decided, no, Franc-tenant works a lot better than that. There are other synonyms that get the sense better. So one of the reasons I made this video is please help out the comments section, that what we did for French here, I'm hoping other people can suggest better names, culturally specific terms that might come up for Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, that are similar enough to what we did to the French one. Like Portuguese, someone said, oh, we say bourgeoisie, just go Burguesia, Livre. So something specific from these other regions, I hope that works out. Similarly, with Germanic languages like Swedish or Danish or Dutch, I hope there's something similar enough to the German version. Please help out in the comments if you know these languages. And this other idea I came up with as just a placeholder, that if it really doesn't translate into your language very well, like what are we going to call them? The bourgeoisie, the magisters? If it really doesn't go into another language well, or doesn't have an analogous or accurate term, like if your only term for that is minor lords, don't use it. Like, oh, we'll call them the gentry. Avoid that. It really implies that they're hereditary nobility, and they're not. So if the only terms you have are something that is so inaccurate it really doesn't convey what they're trying to say, I would recommend simply substituting in the different and more descriptive term alliance of merchants, or the Merchants' Alliance. The example I was using was, well, they're kind of like the Separatist Alliance from Star Wars, that they're all the great commerce guilds and mega corporations came together, so call them the Merchants' Alliance. So, for example, in Italian, that would be La Alleanza dei Mercanti. That if you really have trouble translating this, it's a place to start. Now, the last translation suggestions I'm going to go over are for Polish, which were suggested via my comments section, which makes sense because I've seen YouTube analytics for my channel, and after English-speaking countries like United States, Canada, United Kingdom, the biggest countries they're playing in descending order are Germany, then Scandinavian countries and Holland, then Brazil and Poland. Why does France rank so low? I'm not sure. I think it's because I've heard they have a terrible streaming service for Game of Thrones, so it's not very popular there, but enough people knew French from Canada that I was able to cobble together Franc-tenants with them as a suggestion. But this is what my user base is, my audience base is on YouTube. And if you know another language, please suggest it on here in the comments section of how you would translate it. This is just the major ones I have access to. It was a user in my comments section, Ecophrasis, thank you Ecophrasis, who was going over in detail pretty much all the points I was trying to bring up before of things you should cover of, well, they're merchants, but their name isn't very accurate and it should sound medieval. That in my main video, if you saw that other slide, just from Trade Federation, Separatist Alliance, and Star Wars, and using Google Translate, I tried cobbling together, well, Merchants' Alliance would be Soju's Handlawa. But I was told, he said, no, that's very modern terminology. It doesn't sound medieval. It sounds really weird. So instead, they suggested that Merchants' Alliance, which again is just a placeholder, would be better translated as Związek Kupiecki, which is Merchants' Alliance. And they also suggested, well, maybe Konfederacja would work too, which it's not just confederation, it's a distinct type of alliance formed in medieval and early modern Poland, that they had an elective kingship, that the nobles were very strong there, so they would frequently make these short-lived alliances for the attainment of stated aims, acting on grievances against central authority, like a caucus or something, you could say. So that does fit the freeholders struggling against Valeria's dragon lords. Poland has this history of Konfederacja alliances. But on the other hand, they weren't always struggling. I mean, they didn't say we're going to call ourselves the freeholders because we have this high taxes we want to redress or something. That's the name they got during centuries of peace. That is a name they were given in peacetime. So calling themselves the anti-something confederation doesn't make sense. It's a holdover name. Also, Konfederacja has strong military connotations, which freeholder does not inherently have. It also frequently referred to noblemen, I think. And freeholders are not hereditary nobles. So how much that does it exclusively refer to nobles, I'm not sure. But I will say that perhaps for the placeholder name, maybe Konfederacja Kupiecka is a better placeholder for Merchants' Alliance. But then this user ekphrasis went on in detail. Maybe this is how we would translate it directly into Polish, freeholder, going by that fragment from A Dance with Dragons I gave from, well, Volantis is a freehold like Valeria, all freeborn landholders can vote. That's what freehold is, and that's the literal way of saying freeborn landholders. And again, maybe their translator got it wrong. Wouldn't be the first time an official translator missed a point. But ekphrasis suggested that the Polish version of this would probably be vuosh-cha-nye, short for Wolni Włościanie. I asked what the phonetic pronunciation was. That freeborn landholders, that's how they render it in the books. And it might be better this way than playing around with Merchants' Alliance, because again, I'd said only use it as a last resort because it loses the point that they didn't choose their name. Like, the Dragon Lords wouldn't call them the Merchants' Alliance. It's a plot point that the Dragon Lords don't think of power as coming from merchants. They think it is coming from landowning. So they point out in the comments, you need to try to translate that as best you can, because the whole point is it's this inaccurate term given them by the Dragon Lord aristocracy and the whole land, money, power thing. So I'm reasonably sure, discuss this in the comments on these three translations. Well, German would be Friborger, French would be Franc-tenants, Polish would be vuosh-cha-nye. As for the other Romance languages that are reasonably common, like Spanish and Italian, please help out with those, or any other languages that the books have been translated into and you're watching this in. How would we translate this term to other languages? Please help in the comments. That the points are, it literally means free landholder, but it's an archaic term because really they're more bankers now and merchants. But a big point is, don't use a term you would use for hereditary nobility, like the minor lords, the gentry. So it's been fun playing around with this with everyone and felt very productive, and thanks for all your help.